An elderly man named Yong Kyu was being interviewed for a television program because he was known as the only blind man capable of carving incredibly beautiful personal seals by hand. The host, Soo Jin, started asking about his life, from his gentle hands to the son he raised on his own. She also became curious about the scars on his hands, especially since his palms were still perfectly smooth and carefully maintained. Yong Kyu explained that the injuries came from a small accident long ago, but he always tried his best to protect his palms from getting hurt. He also admitted that he did not like remembering how difficult it had been to raise his son, Dong Hwan, by himself. Since it was already 3 in the afternoon, Yong Kyu asked for a short break from the interview. During that moment, Soo Jin noticed some old photographs hanging around the house. Dong Hwan mentioned that people always said he looked exactly like his father, and he admired the photo taken on the first day Yong Kyu opened his tiny seal shop. Dong Hwan admitted he felt the same way, but he also felt sorry for his father because Yong Kyu constantly asked whether Dong Hwan really resembled him. And every single time Dong Hwan simply reassured him. Later that night, Dong Hwan asked his father whether the interview had been exhausting. Yong Kyu admitted he was a little tired, especially because Soo Jin asked so many questions. Still, he was happy that people continued appreciating his work despite his blindness. Dong Hwan laughed and told him that was normal for a television host. But not long after that, Dong Hwan suddenly received a call from the police. They urgently asked him to come to the hospital because they had discovered the remains of a woman who might actually be his mother. Since Dong Hwan had never met his mother since childhood, he immediately rushed to the hospital and headed straight to the morgue. But instead of seeing a preserved body, all he found were bones. The police quickly explained that the remains belonged to a woman named Yong Hee, Dong Hwan's mother. Her body had been discovered buried in the mountains during a construction excavation. Her identification had been buried alongside her remains, and the police believed she had most likely been murdered. Unfortunately, the case could no longer be investigated because more than 30 years had already passed, meaning the statute of limitations had expired. This was his mother's story. This is The Ugly. The next day, Dong Hwan immediately arranged a funeral for his mother. But there was one heartbreaking problem. He did not even have a single photo of her. Not only that, no relatives or friends came to the funeral either because both of his parents supposedly had no family left. Still curious about the truth, Dong Hwan eventually asked his father about his mother. According to Yong Kyu, she had run away from home many years ago, possibly because someone had harmed her. Yong Kyu explained that when he returned from the market that day, he found Dong Hwan alone in the room. He also insisted that Yong Hee never had any enemies because she was an extremely kind person.
아니, 일 끝내고 집에 왔는데 방엔 너밖에 없고 네 엄마 안 보이더라고.
That question naturally made Yong Kyu curious too, so he started asking what had really happened to Dong Hwan's mother. But Dong Hwan tried to hide the police's suspicion that she may have been murdered. Not long after that, Soo Jin arrived to offer her condolences. She admitted she never expected something like this to happen while they were still filming the interview. Dong Hwan calmly told her it was fine, but Soo Jin misunderstood his response completely. Instead of feeling awkward, she almost seemed relieved that filming could continue, especially now that the story had become much more dramatic. Seeing her reaction, Dong Hwan quietly realized that Soo Jin cared more about television ratings than the family's pain. Then suddenly, several people arrived claiming to be Yong Hee's biological family. They introduced themselves as Dong Hwan's grandmother, aunt, and cousin. But instead of showing sympathy, the cousin immediately started talking about inheritance money. Even worse, the family openly declared that they had no intention of sharing any inheritance with Dong Hwan because Yong Hee had stopped visiting them after running away years ago. They even accused Yong Hee of stealing the grandmother's jewelry and gold before disappearing. Hearing all of this left Dong Hwan speechless. He never imagined his mother came from such a toxic family, and he started believing she probably ran away because of how horribly they treated her. But Dong Hwan honestly did not care about any inheritance. The only thing he truly wanted was a photo of his mother. His aunt then explained that they did not have any pictures because Yong Hee hated taking photos. According to them, she was ashamed of her ugly appearance, and they also claimed she constantly accused her father of cheating on her mother. Dong Hwan quickly defended his mother in his mind, believing it made sense if she had run away after repeatedly witnessing her father's affairs while nobody believed her. But the aunt did not care at all. She simply demanded that Dong Hwan send an official letter refusing any inheritance claims. After that, Dong Hwan finally asked the question that had been bothering him the entire time. He wanted to know just how ugly his mother supposedly was. He even wondered whether she had some kind of facial deformity, but his grandmother explained that Yong-hee had no deformities at all. People simply thought her face was unpleasant to look at. Unfortunately, Soo-jin overheard that entire conversation. The moment she heard it, she immediately asked her boss for permission to investigate the story surrounding Dong-hwan's mother, and Dong-hwan heard her request himself. The next day, everyone was asked to identify Yong-hee's remains. But instead of mourning her properly, her biological family immediately wanted to leave because they could not stand the smell coming from the body. Things became even worse when they caused a scene at the morgue, accidentally knocking Yong-hee's skull onto the floor.
나 옆에서 안 되겠어.
Not long after that incident, Soo-jin contacted Dong-hwan and told him she had visited the area where Yong-kyu first opened his seal shop. The shop had been located near the Cheongpyeong textile factory, which was also the place where Dong-hwan's parents first met, and where his mother used to work. Soo-jin also revealed that she had managed to track down several former co-workers who once worked with Yong-hee, and she planned to interview them the following day. Because of that, she asked Dong-hwan to come along. The next morning, shortly after arriving, Dong-hwan accidentally noticed Soo-jin secretly hiding a camera inside her bag before the interview began. He clearly disliked what she was doing, but every time he tried to complain, Soo-jin kept cutting him off before he could finish speaking. Eventually, the two of them met 3 former factory workers who had worked alongside Yong-hee many years ago. However, Dong-hwan decided not to reveal that he was actually Yong-hee's son. From their stories, Yong-hee had apparently been labeled an ugly woman, and people cruelly nicknamed her Poop Face. The nickname came from a humiliating incident at the factory. One day while working, Yong-hee desperately needed to use the bathroom, so she asked permission from her strict boss. But he only gave her 5 minutes. Unfortunately, the restroom line was too long, and she ended up unable to hold it any longer. She accidentally soiled herself in front of everyone at work. After that day, the workers constantly mocked her with that cruel nickname. They even laughed at the fact that she married a blind man. Hearing those stories made Dong-hwan furious, especially seeing these people casually laughing while talking about his mother's humiliation. Soo-jin then asked what Yong-hee actually looked like for people to treat her that way. She wondered whether Yong-hee had some kind of deformity. One of the former workers explained that Yong-hee had no deformities at all. People simply thought her face looked unpleasant. At the same time, they admitted they were shocked when they learned she had been found buried in the mountains because she had always been known as a kind person who never caused trouble. However, one of them also mentioned that the person who probably hated Yong-hee the most was their former boss because of a certain incident in the past. But they refused to explain the situation further and instead told Soo-jin to speak directly with a woman named Jin Seo. And throughout all of these stories, the film still carefully avoids showing Yong-hee's face. Eventually, Dong-hwan and Soo-jin met with Jin Seo and her 2 children to ask about Yong-hee. At first, Jin Seo's son tried to stop the conversation, but Jin Seo immediately admitted that Yong-hee's death might have happened because of her. She explained that years ago, Yong-hee once found her crying alone at work. Concerned, Yong-hee asked what had happened. That was when Jin Seo finally revealed that their boss had sexually harassed her. But despite what happened, Jin Seo never dared to report him. Their boss was known as a generous and respected man, so she believed nobody would ever take her side. Then, after Jin Seo stopped coming to work for 2 days and was eventually fired, Yong-hee became furious and confronted the boss directly for what he had done.
그만두게 한다는 거.
That same night, Yong-hee was seen secretly writing something on pieces of paper. Her husband, Yong-kyu, noticed it and became curious, but Yong-hee avoided explaining what she was doing. The next day, it turned out she had spread handwritten notes exposing the boss for harassing Jin Seo. Naturally, this made the boss extremely angry, and he immediately ordered his workers to fire Yong-hee. But Yong-hee refused to back down because she believed she had done nothing wrong. She only wanted the truth to come out, so she demanded to confront the boss personally. Ironically, Jin Seo herself became overwhelmed and slapped Yong-hee instead. Later on, Jin Seo explained that, at the time, she felt ashamed because people focused too much on the victim instead of the criminal. But as she grew older, she realized society should have been condemning the perpetrator, not the victim. That realization filled her with guilt, and she became convinced that Yong-hee eventually died because of the boss's actions. After hearing the full story, Sujin suddenly broke into tears because she genuinely pitied Yong-hee. She then suggested visiting Yong-hee's former boss together. But from Dong-hwan's perspective, Sujin's tears felt fake. After all, she had secretly recorded every interview the entire time for her television ratings. The next day, they finally met Yong-hee's former boss, who was now old, poor, and living alone in a tiny room filled with old photographs. Knowing the man was struggling financially, Sujin offered him money while questioning him about Yong-hee. She also reminded him that the case had already passed the statute of limitations, so he no longer needed to hide the truth. Hearing that, the former boss suddenly laughed while mocking Yong-hee's appearance. Then, because the crime could no longer be prosecuted, he finally revealed what he claimed was the truth. According to him, the real killer was not him at all, but Yong-hee's own husband, Yong-kyu. It turned out that Yong-kyu and the boss had actually been close friends. The boss explained that he often complained to Yong-kyu because Yong-hee had recently been embarrassing him publicly. After hearing those complaints, Yong-kyu apologized and promised he would scold his wife. But the following night, the boss still was not satisfied. He sent several men to beat up Yong-hee, while Yong-kyu, being blind, could do absolutely nothing to stop them. However, the next day, Yong-hee directly stormed into the boss's office and attacked him herself. Because of that incident, the boss once again sent his men after Yong-hee. But when they arrived, they were shocked to see Yong-kyu already carrying his wife's body toward the bottom of a hill. Being blind, Yong-kyu had absolutely no idea the boss's men were secretly watching him the entire time. After witnessing that scene, the men believed their job was already finished. Since they assumed nobody would ever come looking for Yong-hee, they quietly helped bury her body after Yong-kyu left the area. Hearing that story, Dong-hwan completely lost control. Unable to believe what he had just heard, he immediately grabbed the old boss by the throat, demanding the truth. At the same time, Dong-hwan also snatched Sujin's camera recordings, despite previously being angry at her for secretly filming everything. Eventually, Dong-hwan returned home and directly confronted his father because he still could not believe the former boss's accusations. With no other choice left, Yong-kyu finally revealed the truth about his past. He explained that throughout his childhood and even into adulthood, he was constantly mocked and beaten because of his blindness. Nobody wanted to help him or even be friends with him, so he eventually had to struggle on his own just to survive. Over time, he developed a talent for carving beautiful seals by hand, and the person who supported him the most back then was the former boss. In fact, that same man was the one who took the photograph on the first day Yong-kyu opened his small seal shop, even though the business had remained empty for weeks. Then one day, a young woman named Yong-hee walked into the shop and complimented Yong-kyu's craftsmanship. Touched by her kindness, Yong-kyu gave her a free seal. That moment became the beginning of their relationship. After that, Yong-hee often visited him and even brought him food, which made Yong-kyu genuinely happy. His friends also constantly praised Yong-hee's beauty in front of him. Not long afterward, the two got married in front of the textile workers and Yong-kyu's friends, who all appeared extremely happy for them. Yong-kyu himself could hardly believe that someone like him had managed to get married, and eventually the couple even had a child together. But one day, everything changed. An old friend visited Yong-kyu and bluntly told him that his wife was not beautiful at all. According to him, Yong-hee was actually ugly. Hearing those words completely shocked Yong-kyu, because until then, all he had ever heard was people praising his wife's appearance. That was when he suddenly realized something horrifying. The laughter and happiness from his friends all those years may not have been genuine support at all. They may have secretly been mocking him the entire time for marrying a woman they considered ugly. On top of that, he had already grown frustrated from constantly hearing complaints from the boss about Yong-hee causing trouble at work. So when Yong-hee was violently beaten by several people one day, Yong-kyu secretly found himself wishing she would die. Then one night, Yong-kyu finally snapped. By that point, he was already overwhelmed with shame, especially after learning that his wife was still causing problems for the boss by spreading written accusations about him. Furious, Yong-kyu demanded that Yong-hee stop interfering in matters that had nothing to do with her. But Yong-hee tried to defend herself. She explained that ever since childhood, people had constantly blamed and mistreated her. Because of that, she learned to stop caring about what others thought of her. Everything only changed after Yong-kyu entered her life. For the first time, she felt accepted by someone who could not judge her appearance. Even if Yong-kyu himself never realized how society saw her. Hearing that only made Yong-kyu even angrier. But even after confessing everything, Yong-kyu showed absolutely no remorse. Instead, he insisted that he had done it for Dong-hwan's sake. In his mind, he believed he was protecting his son from growing up with a supposedly ugly mother, and he even begged Dong-hwan to understand his reasoning. But Dong-hwan refused. The only thing he could understand now was that his own father was a murderer. Overcome with anger, Dong-hwan shoved his father to the ground. The next day, Dong-hwan met Soo-jin and handed over the recordings he had taken from her camera. But before returning them, he had already deleted everything he considered unnecessary, leaving behind only the beautiful moments. He then asked Soo-jin to broadcast only the good parts. Naturally, Soo-jin became disappointed. She pointed out that Dong-hwan was becoming just like his father, someone who refused to accept ugly truths without truly seeing them first. At first, Dong-hwan did not fully understand what she meant, but then Soo-jin handed him a photograph of his mother that she had received from the former boss. Back in the past, the boss used to photograph all of his employees, including Yong-hee, and when Dong-hwan finally saw his mother's face for the very first time, he broke down crying, because the woman in the photograph looked completely normal. She was not ugly at all. In that moment, Dong-hwan realized he had almost become exactly like his father, someone who chose to believe other people's cruel words instead of seeing the truth with his own eyes. And with that heartbreaking realization, the film comes to an end. So the moral of the story is, sometimes the cruelest thing in life is not being born ugly, but being surrounded by people who keep telling you that you are, until even the people who love you start believing it too.